I'm getting ready to launch our first show, Cedric Brown and Friends. To all my friends from around the world and in Canada, please share this broadcast as we go forward. This show is designed to do three things. Number one, to empower, to motivate, and for sure, to educate. Again, please share the broadcast with your friends and your family. On the show, the intention is to continue to bring an awareness of this dangerous virus, which is and can be very dangerous in our society. According to the Johns Hopkins University, the total number of cases in coronavirus is over 8.9 million, with over 468,000 deaths. COVID-19 has undoubtedly affected us socially, economically, psychologically, and for sure spiritually. And it has brought about fear and optimism. In my opinion, we as a world will never be the same again. Coronavirus is an illness caused by virus that can spread from person to persons. The virus COVID-19 is a new coronavirus which have spread throughout the world that we have seen. You can become infected by close contact with a person who has COVID-19. COVID-19 is primarily spread from person to person. You can become infected from respiratory droplets. And when infected, a person cough, sneeze, or talk. You may also be able to get this virus from surfaces by touching the surface, which is contaminated. We want to make sure that we are following all the protocols that are put in place to deal with this virus. Everyone is at risk. Make no doubt, everyone is at risk. So we must do everything that we have to do to protect ourselves. We are designed this evening to bring you some pertinent information that will help you to get through this virus. I have in studio tonight my friends, and I want to introduce them to you. On my far right is none other than Lovelace St. John. He is the pastor from Progress Church. Right beside him, Paul Edwards. He is the pastor from Ecclesia Kingdom Ministries. And right next to me, Carlton Facey. He is the pastor of Redemption Church International. We welcome you, gentlemen, to our program tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome. I want to start out tonight by asking a few questions, and I'm going to go straight to Pastor Paul Edwards. Amen. And one of the questions I want to ask tonight is, what are some of the opportunities that come from the pandemic that can benefit us, not just in our church, but worldwide?
A global view of the pandemic, I think the world going forward will be better prepared. A pandemic is not something that happens 3-4 times in a lifetime. It's probably once or twice in an individual lifetime. And so sometimes we tend to take it for granted, and we get caught off guard. And so I think the level of preparedness going forward, I think will be an opportunity, because the government will have to put the safeguards in place as to whether or not there's a pandemic or not. The safeguards are there so that they can just quickly move into action if this ever occurs again. So I think that's a perfect opportunity that is there for the future. The safeguards, I think, is necessary because it will also help with the economy. We realize how fragile the economy was during this time, the amount of job lost over just a short period of time, how quickly the system can become overwhelmed, like the hospitals, so on and so forth. They're not really designed to accommodate so much people at once being sick. And so I think there's some opportunities there for the government to put some strong rules and safeguards in place that will help us to better deal with the pandemic. In terms of the local church, the opportunities that are there is enormous. There's a lot of new norms that will continue. throughout our church and will benefit us. From a spiritual perspective, we realize that we can't take life and ministry for granted, that life is fragile, that we're here operating in a particular season that God has ordained, and how we function within that season is vitally important. We have to maximize all the opportunities that we have during this particular season. And this, we'll elaborate a little bit later on about some of the specific opportunities that I believe can come from.
Thank you. Bishop Lovelace, I know you oversee a lot of churches and you give direction and oversight to a lot of churches. That same question, if I say to you at this time, that what are some of the opportunities that comes from this pandemic that not only can affect church, because as much as we're in the church, the world is a big part of it. We live in a world.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you from your perspective, what do you think about that?
Well, I think one of the first thing that comes to mind is just even avenues of communication. How do we communicate with each other? There are some things we probably never see before, or we never thought about before the pandemic came. But because we had to find different ways of communicating, what we have gone ahead and realized it is so much more we can connect with churches half a continent away or a full continent away. So these are some things we have learned, just collaborating and connecting with one another, and recognizing that as any organization, you have to realize there has to be always contingency in place for days like these, and I believe we will probably see more situations like this in the world. So avenues of communication and just looking for opportunities.
Perfect. That is so awesome, because again, we live in a world that is affected by this. And as much as we have a lot of people in churches going to church, our people in church, they're scared. So Bishop Facey, if I would like to hear from you that what are some of the norms now that what will be a part of our churches during this COVID-19?
First of all, we are doing social distancing. That's something that's going to be with us for a long time, because that's not how we function prior to COVID-19. We are presently realizing that in order for us to fellowship, we're going to have to wear masks. These are basic, but they are necessities for if we are going to come together. We have to make sure that there is sanitization. I realized that we had to take the very chairs from the sanctuary to provide proper seating capacity for our congregation to sit 6 feet apart. That's going to be with us for a long time. And so in my mind, I realized that there are still additional ways that we are going to have to communicate with our congregation via what we've been doing through the new technological world that we're connected to via social media, via Zoom. And in that context, I think we can elaborate more on that. But I realize that we also have to make sure that persons are prepared and ready and trained for the new way that churches are going to function.
Thank you so much. A lot of our church building has been closed down based on instruction from the government, and we understand why. But there's a question out there that has been asked. Is the church an essential place? Why was the building closed? Pastor Hedros, can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think the idea is to separate the building from the church.
Yeah.
Right? The church is the people, and the building is where we assemble. So the government did not close the church. They closed the building in order to protect our people.
That's right.
And to slow down the spread of this virus. But the church itself, like always in difficult times, seemed to grow. Biblically, historically, the church spread through, the most difficult of times and persecution. And so our ministry has spread. I truly believe that there's just an awesome church growth that is happening during this period of time, just because of the various platforms that we can now communicate on, and our audience base has become broad and literally almost unlimited. And so the church is really doing well during this period of time and is essential, will always be essential to the lives of people, for transformation, for salvation, for counseling, for the seasons of life where people need help. I mean, the church is definitely an essential part of our society.
I think it's important that people understand that even though the building is closed, the church of God is still going on.
That's right.
So it is very important, and I'm glad that you touch on that way so people understand that we are the church.
Yeah.
We are the church. So we need to stay strong. We need to still encourage people. We need to still encourage each other as we go forward. Bishop Facey, how can churches collaborate together to have a greater impact?
I think this is going to be a tough one, but I think the first thing I would share with you to say, and it's honest, I think this COVID-19 has just shown us how we can amalgamate. And I think amalgamation is something that has to be taught of by the churches that are out there. Then it will enable us to really function at a higher level. Why? Because the kingdom, I'm going to go into this right now because I think it's an opportunity for us to think about kingdom and think about the different levels of Christianity, because we mixed it, and we have the kingdom that we talk about, which we need to go back to understanding kingdom different from church, right? And so we have persons who are kingdom-minded and persons who are Christian-minded. And allow me to just take a few minutes to share that. The kingdom-minded person governs their life according to the infallible word of God that guides us and directs us. The Christians are governed by a mindset of an individual, which is really a denomination that states how they believe and what they believe. I think that if churches can really go back to kingdomology, I think that we'll be more effective and we will reach the world at a more deeper and higher level. And so that's my take on what we need to do. And I think this is a good time for leaders of churches to look at those who can work together and come together and let us be more effective, and we could dominate more.
That's true. You know, one of the things I've said on my 6 o'clock broadcast I have is that the playing field is level. So every man is doing the same thing. We're masking up. We're staying safe. The playing field is level. And I'm hoping that we as leaders would start to exemplify that, because truly of a fact, we're on the same page. And it's a great time now for us to, it's an opportunity for us to see that we can work together to get things done faster and to get things done better. And I'm hoping that as leaders, we can come together and see it. The playing field is level. There is nobody that is bigger than anyone. Everybody is doing the same thing because we're in a pandemic. And we need to understand that. Bishop Lovelace, I would love for you to talk about that a little bit, about how can church collaborate together. Some points, you probably could say some stuff to show our pastors and our bishop and our leaders how much more we can come together.
Well, first thing I would say here is COVID-19 came and it exposed a few things, not only in society, but I believe also within the body of Christ, those of us who are followers of Jesus Christ. Some things have been shown to us. Things which we thought were sacred cows have now been exposed. They are not so, So the reality, the first thing we need to come to realization, we need to put aside pride and be leaders who recognize that I'm not here trying to build an empire. We are simply called to equip the saints for the work of ministry. If we put aside, and I'm not trying to build my own empire, Loveless empire, so how big I can make it, because look at the pandemic came and how quickly that was eviscerated before us. So what do we need to do right now? How can I collaborate with my brothers and sisters? So number one, what we need to do is to look at even space. We were we used our space during that time, but space are sit. And even when the pandemic is not on, a lot of us have real estate sitting and not fully equipped. So that's one area. It could imagine much more could be done if we collaborate to fulfill the Matthew 25 mandate Jesus gave us, to go into the prison, to feed those who are hungry, to visit those who are sick. If we collaborate, so much more could be done. So I believe that this is the time we have to start reimagining, re-envisioning. 2020, the year of vision, now it's time to have a clear vision as to what we are to do in order to go forth.
Can I just
Yes.
try to piggy into Bishop, because when I use the word there, talking about amalgamation, I think most people might be saying close your church now, but that's not what the point that I'm trying to get at, because a lot of times there's persons hear that and they're saying that that's what you mean. But I'm saying, how can I connect with someone? Because there's always persons that are not doing as well as others because of the lack of the ability to do it, maybe the resources that you need to advance what you're doing. But if you connect with someone, it doesn't take away from what you were doing, but you'll be able to do more in that area. And I said, and that's what I'm hearing out of you.
Yeah, and I think in some instance, let me just say it, in some instance, it means that some buildings will have to be closed.
Oh, we're saying right now, right? Yeah. Well, Bishop, all right. Because it's too much waste.
That's right, because how can we merge, utilize the space that we have, especially if you have the same vision. If you have the same vision, work together to fulfill the mandate that you have received. No need for both of these congregations to be struggling just to occupy a space which you only use really 40% of the time.
Wow.
3 hours a week.
Pastor Edwards, I see you hitching to go. You look like you want to add something to that.
Well, I just wanted to just add the relationship piece to collaboration. Nothing meaningful has been accomplished without right relationship, proper relationship. And so I know Bishop Facey received the vision, and he started the International Council of Pastors and Bishops, where he's trying to bring church leaders together, basically to come together. And I realize that the type of relationships that we're forming will be vital to proper collaboration for coming together and work through some of the issues that we need to work through in order to deal with get to where we need to get to.
That's very important.
I think that's so important to relationship, because I believe even in the body of Christ, we get too much mistrust, with one another. We need to, and especially of us as leaders, it calls for a level of maturity, to be willing to be confronted, and confrontation is not hostility, but need to be confronted with some of the error that we walk. And error doesn't mean that you is heresy, but sometimes we do things, we say things, we make decisions that does not advance the kingdom. But if we can collaborate, connect, build relationship, let me just say it, if us as leaders, how can we ask people to submit to us if we're not willing to submit to anybody?
Wow. And Bishop, this is something that this is big, because what we're seeing through COVID is that there's a number of churches, based on calls that I receive, that a number of pastors or the churches weren't properly structured. There were no proper government, there were no proper order, and things weren't properly in place. And because of that, they could not acquire a lot of the opportunities that came out of COVID because of the lack of proper government and structure. And a lot of the things that happen here is because a lot of persons are too pride has taken them over, because they're doing things without proper leadership and there's no accountability. And when there's no accountability and you're not under the auspices of someone who has gone through certain training that could help a person to take them to the next level. So I think that's very big and deep in that sense, that we need to make sure that those things are in place.
The consequences of the pandemic could have us for all starting to reveal themselves. So let's check that there is a real inequality and social deprivation that will increase. That certainly will increase. And I want to follow up with this question, Bishop. And this is very tricky. And I remember sitting with a bunch of pastors one time, and I said, Why can't we work together? I said, and I said it clearly, I said, some of us should actually just join up with somebody and make it work. Mm-hmm. But I realized, as Bishop Facey said, pride is a big issue with us as men of God. But the question I want to ask is, should our churches be spending large sum of money and building after what we see happening in this pandemic?
Well, even before the pandemic, I would strongly believe that churches should be prudent as to how you spend your resources. So the pandemic come to show, to magnify it more as to how could we best reshape. Because the reality is, if a church just looking to go back within the four walls after this, they have missed the lessons of this right here. Now, if you're going to spend money, your money should really be spent on bettering people's lives. Mm-hmm. If most of your budget is spent on a building you only use for 40%, 40%, it means that something is not, you're not being good stewards of what God commissioned you to do.
So what would you say to a pastor that is in a situation like that?
Get right counseling. You know, there are people who can help walk with you in that journey as to how to get to the other side of that. Because people walk into this situation sometimes of lack of knowledge. People go into situation because, you know what, that's all they have seen modeled before them. You know, because, you know, there are things that are going on in the church. It's been going on for years, you know. And so a young man, a young woman come and they think, well, that's the way we got to do it. But now is the season to adjust, to reimagine, refocus.
Yeah.
Now is the season to say, you know what, we have been doing this for so long, you know, but God has put us in a place right now as we get ready for the reset, the relaunch of ministries to say, okay, what do we need to do differently going forward?
I'm hoping that pastors and leaders that are watching this program would gather the information that we're putting out and realize that there is help out there. And one thing we cannot be afraid of is to ask for help. If you need help, you have to ask for help. And we cannot allow pride to come into the way of asking for help. Why? Number one, we have people lives are at stake.
That's right.
Our whole families are at stake. And as we go forward in this program, this is designed to educate our leaders and our pastors and our bishops that there is help out there and we need to seek the proper help. There are men in this city that are knowledgeable enough to help you. There are women in this city that are knowledgeable enough to help you. We need to put the pride aside and seek the help that we need. Mm-hmm. Because if we get the help that we need, then the people that we're leading will be better, for sure. They will have more trust in us. There are many people that lead in church that people don't trust. You lead in church. You know, it is my motto. I'm not looking to start a ministry because I want to be a leader. Mm. If there's no purpose, I don't want to start a ministry. If I start a ministry, it has to be effective in a way where it's changing people's lives. Mm. I want to move on with a question here. Bishop Facey, how will this pandemic forever change our church?
The first thing, I think that during the course of the last couple of maybe 100 days, I think I've looked at 4 major relaunch that we must do in our churches. And the first one is that there must be a relaunch of culture. And I thought about that very strong because the sociological concept of the church or the mindset of the people was formulated by maybe a grandfather or that's regarding the church, mm-hmm. It's general mm-hmm. concept, and how we do things and how the church should function. I remember reading a book once and it talks about pagan Christianity. And the first time I purchased, when I purchased it, I said, why did I buy it? But started to look into it. I realized that there's a lot of things that we do in church. I think Bishop said, touched a little bit. It's something that doesn't have anything to do with the progress or the moving forward of the church. And so culture must change. And when we talk about culture, culture is wide, right? So we have to talk about taking the church back again to the kingdom culture, which is important and necessary. And we have to really focus on that, because a lot of the churches weren't taught, our ministries weren't taught properly about kingdom, right? So religiosity took over, and that dominated the mindset of the people. So we're going to move from culture. There's another area is that we have to have a relaunch of ministries, because there are a lot of ministries that has now burdened because of COVID-19 that should have been operating before. If you look at in the book of Revelation, or Paul's writing, when he wrote into the church, he didn't write unto a church of the firstborn or the church of that. All these churches were community churches. He wrote into the church in Colossae, the church in the Ephesus church, the Corinthians church. So those churches were community churches, right? And what has happened to the body of Christ today, the communities all failed because the churches failed the community. And so what we need to do is to relaunch ministries and get back into the community and become more community oriented. And the next one is that we're going to move from ministry to leadership. If there's anything we're going to do, we're going to relaunch leadership. Our leaders must be trained. I realize that COVID has exposed a lot of that we realize that we have a number of persons that are operating untrained, and it is not building the kingdom, it is damaging the kingdom. So what do you do when you have loyalty with you, but loyalty is affecting you? You're going to have to make sure that those persons, they're loyal, but they're untrained.
Wow.
So you're going to have to put that in place. And then the next one we're going to have to relaunch is facilities, as Bishop says. We're going to have to relaunch facilities. We're going to look at how we can revitalize the facilities, how we can use it for different programs that we have never used it for. Because can I say to everybody, many of us have churches, and I think I've shared that with Icbp pastors, that most of us have no programs in our churches where we could be funded by the government, but all we have is church. So now we are going to look at what are some of the opportunities that are there and relaunch facilities where it can be used for different things, different events, different programs that will benefit the community and the church. And I think those 4 areas are...
Thank you, Bishop. Pastor Edward, let me be a little bit provocative here. Relaunching ministry, what would that look like for you?
For me, let me just take one step back and then 2 steps and then 3 steps. So the first step back is that a lot of the issues that we're experiencing in the discussion we had a minute ago about pastors needing help and so on and so forth, it's not an issue of pride, it's an issue of maturity. Anyone that is mature have pride under control.
Oh.
Once you're not mature enough, then pride will get the best of you. And then you cannot even help yourself, much less others, because you're your own worst enemy. So that I think is a major issue. That is something we might need to look at in some more depth. But when it comes to the way we have benefited because of COVID-19, is what I've found personally is that my how I minister the word changed.
Okay.
Because my audience is no longer my congregation.
Yes, sir.
I've realized that even my ministers and those in my church have elevated the level of their communication.
Wow.
Just the way they speak. Because now they realize that.
Worldwide.
Yeah. You get what I'm saying? I was looking at not this Sunday, but the Sunday prior to, and one of our pastors ministered, and I was looking at it. We had 3,300 views.
Wow.
In that one. The one I did yesterday, we are over 700 already. So we are speaking to people wide and far, of different cultures, backgrounds. And so the level of discourse from the podium will change forever going forward because of COVID-19. Another thing that I realized has changed is the new platforms that have now become important because they're vehicles of communication to our ministry. So now we're going to have IG ministry, Facebook ministry, all kinds of ministries. And our young people that sometimes were sitting there not engaged, they are ready for this a long time ago. So the new softwares and TV programs that we have brought in, our young people through the different programs, shows like this, our young people will be active in ministry, learning and growing as individuals. That I think will not change. In terms of what a relaunch will look like, I look at it this way. I'm moving at a much slower timetable than the government for the safety and the security of my people, right? But at the same time, I'm not naive as to the fact that we have to get going. So during this time, we are literally imagining how we do ministry, both with the new things we're incorporating and how we're going to do it going forward. And so for us, it will be a new beginning. I mean, everything will change. Even the color on the wall will change. The stage will change. When people walk back in there, everything will be different.
Wow.
And how we approach ministry will be different. And I will be meeting with our leaders. We're going to go through a series of consecration before God, because Bishop Facey spoke about leadership. And I think that is just so important to what we do in the future. So how we lead, how we brand, how we look, how we communicate will change forever. All you know.
Bishop Lovelace,
Yes.
I the same question for you. Relaunching ministry. What does that look like for you?
Well, one of the things we realize, people consume information differently now. Some of the things we are talking about right now is on demand. So it means that I have to prepare information. I have it available, because the greatest benefit now I can give to my congregation is equip them to lead their families.
Wow.
To pour into them, because we have seen for the last 3 months, guess what? Those head of those households had to ensure that their family kept moving spiritually and growing. Whilst we had live broadcasts of some of our services of Bible study, but now we have to take that now to on demand, where we are making available materials. They can go to the website and download this material, follow a discipleship teaching series right on there, equip them for in terms of. So that's one of the things we realize going forward is very important for us. One of the things we also recognize going forward is every gift in the house has to be recognized and given the opportunity to grow and develop, to be used. You know, ministry cannot succeed in this day around one personality. It has to be a collaboration where you bring in all your people together, use those gifts in order to fulfill. So for us, reopening, relaunching, that's where we are. And one of the things, even today I was sharing with my sons them as to, there has to be a focus, an intentional focus now on men. You know, so how can we, because reality, North American church, it's the way it's designed, it's not welcoming for men. You know, that's reality. But you know, so we have to figure, okay, how can we now do ministry to recognize men, to bring men in, to evangelize and discipleship men? That's a little different than what we see ministries today.
But Bishop, can I just add to what you're saying?
Yeah.
If you notice, the reason why we didn't have men is because the church is feminized.
Yeah. So
Because the church is feminized, most men says the church is for women. Because when you look in the pulpit, you would see more women operating than men. But we have to really get back to the place where, as you said, the gifts is there to help to develop that gift and to put them back in place, right? And finally, Pastor, I had to say this. We have to be more creative and innovative as we move forward and get back into the technological world. So here's what I would advise everybody to do. if you are not yet at that technological level, you would want to find young people in your church, invest in them.
That's right.
So that they can invest in you.
Wow.
Because that is what I find that out, that's where the world is going. It shifts, and the technology that I need, I'm not up there yet. So I have to depend on those persons who are there. Or some ministries might not have all of that, but you still need to make sure you invest. So some of the money we're spending then on building, you spend on investing on people.
Oh. You know what? When it comes on to men's ministry, I have a great passion for that.
Yeah.
Because too much of our men, to me, is what I call lackadaisical, lazy. And I know that's a very hard thing to say, but it is what it is. I've been in church where it's just me and the pastor. We have 6, 7 men, and everything that we do is just me and the pastor. And we can't find the men to work. I started a program last year called Man in the Mirror, which was very successful. Mm-hmm. And I think as pastors and as leaders, as we want to develop our men, we have to create a platform where men can become comfortable, where they can begin to open up. We do programs for everything else. But we want to develop a program, develop a platform where we can bring our men together. Because one of the things I said in the program last year with our men in the Men in the Mirror conference, I said, this is a safe place. I didn't ask any lady to come, and that was the first thing I said. When men feel like they're in a safe place, they will begin to open up. And after we finished ministering, I see how the men came to the altar and men were breaking down. So we have to intentional about what we're putting on for our men. And we have to be intentional in developing our men. So that's what I would want to have. Pastor Edward, you're itching to go.
Go.
I just wanted to piggyback a little at something Bishop said.
Yes.
Lovely said, because I just think it's so important. When you talk about giving the gifts expression, I think one of the things that must happen going forward is that we must begin to reimagine the fivefold gifts.
You have to.
Wow.
What is it really meant to be, and what is it? Because a lot of the gifts have been reduced to titles without function. And there's no fruitfulness behind it.
That's a whole show, you know, right?
Wow.
Because we have to really reimagine the work of the evangelists in the 21st century.
Yeah, it's the same community thing.
We have to reimagine the role of teachers, pastors, bishops, apostles, because these have become something people have in their business cards that make them look important. But it's not really driving ministry.
Right.
And the Bible said what it was designed to do, which is was to equip the body of Christ and to
Perfect the same.
And to perfect the saints.
Edify.
Those are not the actual manifestation of that. So I think that's something we have to reimagine. And as we build relationship, I think it's something that we must have a meaningful discourse on.
That's right.
It can no longer be a sacred cow that we all know nobody wants to touch, because we're concerned about who's going to be offended.
Right.
And so I think that's something we really need to imagine, because the gifting is important.
And I think that's where we have in the Icbp, the International Council of Bishops and Pastors, where as pastors we can come together, you know, and recognizing when we come together, we are at the table of the Lord, and when we come there, we are able to discuss and bring this there, and never don't feel in such a way, well, okay, because you have a certain title, what you have to contribute is not important, because you'll be surprised where wisdom can come from.
Wow. You know, that leads us into our next question, which is very, very tricky. Spiritual growth. I spoke on spiritual growth a couple of weeks, and I emphasized on a couple of points that spiritual growth has nothing to do with what we have gathered in terms of building or assets or the amount of people that we have, because there are many people that are in church for 10, 20, 15 years, and they're still at the same place. And this is from leaders to members going right down. There are people in leadership right now that are so immature, and they function at a level that is way below the kingdom. In this time of COVID, the question I would want to ask, What do we need to put in place to ensure spiritual growth, not just for our people, but for those that we're leading and for those that we're aspiring to put into leadership position? Bishop Facey.
I think that I go right back to spiritual growth. All of this is really, it comes through proper training, right? And I believe that we have to look at the holistic approach of a man. We are body, soul, and spirit, right? And I think oftentimes we focus on areas that is outside of what is spirituality. Because really, what does it really mean for a person to be spiritual, right? I cannot be a spiritual person and my biblical comprehension is zero. It means that there's no spirituality. So I think that we have to get back to some real serious Bible teaching and biblical training for persons who are in leadership. And I don't want to go all over the place with that, because I have sat with many persons and come to realize that they are unfruitful. And their unfruitfulness is based on the lack of knowledge of the Word of God.
Bishop Facey, let me interject there.
Yeah.
I need to interject. There are many of us, we're associated with a lot of leaders.
Yes.
And we can identify that a lot of our leaders are spiritually immature. How do we get that message to them that they need? Because when you look at spiritual maturity, it's the process of becoming more like Christ. How do we get people, how do we get our leaders who are so high, who are so titled, who are so in position? How do we get our leaders to understand that they need to sit and listen to somebody who is mature? Because I believe there's a sense of humility need to come about. But that is what is lacking. I want you to speak into that.
Let me say this. From my personal point of view, I think that listening to tapes, going to seminars, going to Bishop Church to hear him minister, listening to Pastor Paul minister, and then I go to sit down to listen to him. I visit not because I'm the preacher, but how many persons today do visit a church outside of they are the speaker? Let's use that. And so who feeds you when you are out there feeding everyone and it's time for you to be fed? Because most persons, they're not under the auspices of nobody. They are independent. And so who is your pastor?
My God.
Wow.
That's the point.
Wow.
Who is your pastor? Because all of us need a pastor. So if I have a pastor, my pastor has been pastoring me for over 20 years, right? And that's my spiritual father for 20 years, never had another one.
Wow.
So I can call him for advice. And I have times when I just want to listen to him and just interact with him to see where I am. And I have persons that I interact with and listen to. So I just think that it's so imperative for us to get back to that place. And sometimes we want to go into deep areas. And then you talk a little bit about the humility that is required. And that's something that we have to understand, that if I'm not humble enough, right? Look at Jesus. He was humble to the point that he condescended. And so some of us do not know what that means.
So right? Basically, Bishop, I from what I'm gathering from what you're saying, accountability is important.
Oh, gosh.
And if we should ask that question to pastors around, bishops around, who are you accountable to? I'm wondering what response would I get. Let me move on to Bishop Lovelace.
Ask him that.
Spiritual growth, sir. For our leaders and our congregation.
I think Paul writes into the Hebrews in Hebrews chapter 5, and he made this statement. He said, I could not talk to you, in terms of when you should be eating strong meat, you're still partaking of milk. But strong meat is necessary for you to be able to discern
Right.
good
And evil.
and evil. Oh, Lord. Because in reality, what has happened, because the capacity have not grown. If you're going to grow in your capacity, it means you have to step out from the norm.
Wow.
It means that you have to be willing to read books. Some people not necessarily even agree with your own philosophy of ministry.
Wow.
You have to be willing to step out into that area, to allow your mind to grow, that you can begin to develop as a human being. If you're not willing to read, so for a leader, if show me a leader who does not read, guess what? His capacity is diminished.
Wow.
To read a book.
Wow.
You got to read.
Wow.
You got to read, and you know, and as a, you got to get into word, not just for preaching, but get into word that you can grow as a person also, right? As a follower of Jesus Christ. So that's very important in terms of the spiritual growth for nourishing on the word, reading and developing, and then there is no growth without you being challenged.
Wow.
Wow.
You know, so the challenge comes in different ways. Iron sharpeneth iron, right? You know, so if you're only hanging around, let me put this a little bit away. If you want to grow, you got to put yourself where you can be sharpened.
Yeah.
Yes. Pastor Hedra, that's you.
So, Bishop, what about your environment?
Well, yeah. So the environment. So
Your environment.
Environment has changed. Yeah,
With.
that's right.
Because sometimes people are connected to the wrong persons that don't help them because the environment is very shallow.
That's right.
And then there's no expansion.
You're in a situation where you have never been pushed, never been challenged. You know, everything that you do is everybody say, yes, sir, you're right, sir, yes, sir. Or you can never grow.
Yeah, but let me be a little bit provocative there, because many times when you challenge leaders, especially if you're insubordinate to them, if you challenge a leader, they'll think like, who is this man to be speaking to me? Who is this person? Because many times, the Bible says a little child can lead. But many times, depending on who you are, you can't talk to certain people. They'll never even give you the time of the day.
Could I just say something on this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maturity piece. The problem is so overwhelming right now, because you're talking about how can leaders become mature. So if you're questioning the maturity of leadership, how about the people they lead?
Oh.
So what you're saying is that we have immature congregations, people who are spiritually malnourished and underdeveloped. And that's the reason why we have no fruitfulness, no progress, no productivity. That's why people don't respect the church. That's why the world has not been reached. So I'll say something. So let's talk about that. If I'm going to say anything tonight that I think would benefit leaders out there in terms of maturity, I'm going to say two things. Number one, reimagine the concept of spiritual fathering.
Wow.
Because it is a trans-new migration of spirit, not so much DNA. It's the ability to submit to a man or a woman that carries the grace and the maturity to bring out the best in your life, to guide you and to steer you in the right way. If we don't have that form of accountability, we will never experience maturity. Now, growing up in church, I had those fathers in my life, and I spoke about some of them yesterday. But C.A. Holsworth, the man who preached me out of the gospel, and the first person that I really modeled myself after. And then I spoke about my wife's dad, Bishop Hall, and with some of my tendencies that I still have in ministry today. The way he's frugal and prudent, and he hold the money up. He saw the church money as God's money, not his money. And how so that's where that came from. And then I've later learned from, I spoke about Bishop Kings, that he prays more than he eats. And like by being around him, I begin to gather that peace. And then I speak about the most important season of my life, in which God has introduced Bishop Lovelace, sitting to my right, a model of grace and humility and respect. And how that, by experiencing all of those fathers, I have learned how to mature, right, and to grow. And Paul said we have a lot of teachers, but we don't have many fathers. So it's okay to know the word and you can say it back, but it has nothing to do with maturity. If you don't have those that are walking with you and journeying with you and helping you to come to a place where the word becomes applicable, becomes and this is that's the father piece. Now, the other piece that I would say for everyone out there that are listening, spiritual definition of maturity is the ability to receive corrections and instructions.
That's right.
If you're offended because of the truth, you're immature.
That's right.
If you believe you're too high to be spoken to, especially if you're approached the right way with the right tone, tenor, and grace, you're immature.
Wow. And we said earlier in our pre-discussion that that offense is a bait that Satan uses to hold the men or women of God hostage. So it's always good not to allow offense to really have you and hold you hostage.
That's right.
Well,
And those profound parts.
Well, as we go forward, I'm hoping that those that are watching this program tonight will gather the information that we have, that we're putting out there, because I'm telling you, if you put it to practice, it will work. You know, one of the things I realize in church is we have people in church that come to church every Sunday, and if you ask them, what did the pastor preach? They say, he preached a good message. But if you ask them what that message was about, most of the time they cannot tell you. And I am very concerned about our people who are not even in church right now and just watching a TV program, you know, or just watching a pastor preaching. You know, what are we doing now as leaders, as pastors or pastor in churches? You guys are pastor in church. What are you guys doing? And I'm asking this question specifically because I want our people to hear this. What are you doing, Bishop Facey? What are you doing, Pastor Edwards? What are you doing, Bishop, in regards to spiritual maturity for your people that are in your church that were coming up, but they weren't there yet? They were in church, and you thought they were at a certain position, but they're not there. What are you guys doing? Bishop Lovelace.
When this pandemic started, one of the verses of scripture the Lord laid at my heart was to, in this season, you know the condition of your flock and to consider the herd. That's one of the first words the Lord gave me.
Wow.
And I begin to ponder on that passage of scripture, because then a lot of things will be revealed as you go through. Because many times we equate spiritual maturity with church participation. Now, church participation is very important. It's essential because it tells you that person is committed to the kingdom and what goes on.
Wow.
But spiritual maturity, how we help our people to grow, is how they go through difficult season. The trial of your faith brings about patience or endurance. So we equip you, we pour into you the word of God, but at some point we got to see if that word is actually gaining roots. Gaining roots, and it can only gain roots when you are being tested, when you go through a difficult situation. You know, even the way we communicate has to change as preachers. Yeah, you know, we have to realize now. It's just like you go to school, right? If you want to become any proficient at a subject, you're going to stick with it for a good 4 years and go through it linearly until you get good at it. But many of us, we preach topically, you know, and we have to get back to the systematic teaching. Expositive. So, like, for instance, one of the things even before this last year, we went through the entire Old Testament, book by book. This year, we're going through the New Testament, book by book. You know, even in pandemic, we didn't stop because we realized, let's just get back to the basics of people receiving the word in order for when difficult times come, they can use the word as an anchor.
Pastor Edwards, same question.
Let me just say a few things. One of them is hard, but let me say it. Bishop spoke about being expository. I really don't believe preaching from the pulpit was designed to mature people. You understand what I'm saying? Teaching did that. That there were first called Christians at Antioch because Paul taught there for 3 years.
That's right.
So they begin to see Christ or the word in them through teaching.
Wow.
So I think we have to start to preach a little bit.
Preach.
Slow it down in the pulpit. Stop the whooping and the hollering and the heart and making all kind of noise. And give people clear rightly dividing the word.
Wow.
That has to be a little slowed on there. Then the second thing, and I think this is important, but I want to do them as nuggets because I think people can grab it, and like you said, you want them to receive
Yes.
points that is applicable that
Right.
they can use. So the second part of this development piece is that we have to, and I said it yesterday in my message to our people, that we have to start look again at the relationship between programs and people. So if we're just having programs to have church and have something going on in church, as opposed to use the programs to build meaningful relationship and break it down into areas of education and knowledge based on age groups, so on and so forth, based on families, based on young people, based on, and then in those areas you're being taught at your level. Because Bishop said something very important earlier, is that the way people consume information today has changed. I have a grandson. He's 2 years old, and he can serve the phone, the tablets better than I can. He doesn't even want me to touch it.
That's his world.
And when you speak to him, he doesn't listen because his head is so in it.
Wow.
And it doesn't matter how much problems he give you. If you put a tablet in front of him and put on ABC, the world is done and his focus changed, and that's it. He doesn't want to hear anything. So that generation will grow up and they will learn through visual aid. Through what they see, not so much what they hear. And so I think that transition has started a while back, and we're still making up a lot of noise and nobody's listening.
Wow.
You understand? And that's what you're saying when you said people will say, well, it's a good word. Content.
Wow.
What is there to apply? And how they can apply.
Well, this conversation is going so great. I have a few more questions, but I have one question I really want to get into before we close off the program. Thank you guys so much for watching us and joining us. I'm hoping that you're sharing this broadcast because this will educate, empower, and motivate somebody to the next level. Let me step out a little bit here. This is very provocative. This is me now. This is my take. I believe that there are pastors that are suffering right now emotionally.
Yeah.
I believe pastors are crying out. And even in this COVID time, they're wondering what's going to happen because there's a level of pride among, especially us as men, that we don't want to look like we fail. What can we say to our pastors right now that are in that? I believe, I sense in my spirit that there are pastors that are in that position. They don't know what's going to happen when this opens up back. They don't know if they're going to be pastoring. What can we say to those men so they could know that they have a safe, they can come to somewhere, they can go somewhere, they can seek, come to someone? Bishop Tracy.
So what's the question? What can you say to
What can you say to a pastor right now that is suffering in silence?
I think the pastor who is suffering in silence is the question. We kind of reverse it. Because if you're suffering, I think you have to seek help. I think you are to seek physician because you are in need of help. And so if the pastor is out there and you are suffering in silence because maybe you're emotionally hurting, I think it's imperative that you would want to find a person, again, Pastor Paul talked about it earlier, that you would have a relationship with. Because persons don't just go to individuals to share what they're going through. They'd want to find a person that they have a relationship with. And so it is sad if you were just like a Robinson Crusoe, that you was just in all this world all by yourself.
Wow.
And so you should have a person, or you should have a pastor or your bishop that you could really confide in to talk about what you're going through. Because let me say this, that I believe that based on what is happening now, the church is so essential that persons miss this. We are frontliners and we're first responders. And so being the first responders and being frontliners, look at what we do. We do funerals, we visit the sick, we have to deal with the marital conflicts that is happening. We have to deal with the violence that are taking place in the community. And we have to deal with all of the issues that is happening in the community. So that's the pastor, right? And we have to counsel. So if you look at the list of things, and while COVID is taking place, you're going through all of that. And so you're dealing with that, and then you're dealing with your personal issues, as you said, because your churches might not be doing well, because I've heard of situations where pastors have shared that from the day COVID hit the first week, they don't hear from some of their members.
Oh,
right?
That's
So
what I'm talking
those
about.
churches are literally already closed.
Yes.
They have never gotten an offering. It means that, first of all, they weren't shepherding, right? Because a sheep doesn't run away from their shepherd, right? And so you can't find them. So what we're seeing, that there was a lot of things that were put together that was functioning as a ministry or as church, but COVID really exposed it. So I'm going to say to that pastor, what I would recommend you doing is stop for a minute, get your act together, find a pastor or a bishop, someone that you believe you can confide in, talk to them about it, get started, don't give up, because that's the passion you have, right? Your ambition is to become a pastor. And I would say to you, it is still possible. God wants to use you, but get ready, be trained. My Bishop Liston Page taught us this. He says, never you ordained anyone in ministry unless they have 3 years of biblical knowledge.
Wow.
And so that's what I'm saying. So I'm just saying to you that pastors, we're here to help.
You said something a while ago, Bishop, that I want to back up on. You said it's your passion if you want to pastor.
Yeah.
But I want pastors to know that you don't need a building to pastor. Because you can serve in the kingdom of God without being a lead pastor. So not because it's your passion, that doesn't mean you need to continue starting and stopping and starting and stopping. We need to find a place and be fit. Pastor, let me hear from, I'm going to come to you, sir. Bishop Lovelace, the same question for you. What can you say to those pastors?
Well, I certainly agree with the relational piece of it, because I think I have to tell people I'm not qualified to speak into your life because I don't have a relationship with you. You know, some people, when a crisis hits, they start calling your phone for you. I cannot speak adequately into that situation because there's no relationship there.
Wow.
Now, so it begins with relationship. Relationship is where it begins. But it also goes to, in terms of where what needs to be done as pastors who are hurting, is recognize, you know what, as we are human beings. And I think sometimes we make being in a lead position as pastor as something that is so high.
Wow.
We are God created all of us to be relational people. So there has to be, whether it's naturally, if in case you need mentors, you need a father to walk with, but you need to have friends. You need to have friends. I know people who their pastor, they couldn't get them on the phone, because their pastors have a country over, and they have gatekeepers just to be able to get a pastor. That person would die before they can even get help. So, but if you have build relationship, people can connect it, and just have friends.
Oh, Pastor Edwards.
Let me speak to two different types of pastors. If a pastoring is, number one, a fivefold ministry gift, so it's a gift from God. And that person who God gives the gift to is because he knows that they carry the spirit and the temperament to be patient with others and to bring them along. It's not something you have a passion for. You're either called or gifted for. Because if you have a passion for something that you're not called and gifted for, it's going to be a painful journey. A long, painful journey.
That's right.
So that's number one. Number two, in the broad context of pastors going through suffering, it's seasonal. Every man of God that is called goes through those seasons. Whether it's to mature you, to grow you, to break you, because sometimes God calls us, but our will is stubborn. I remember God broke my foot once. Put me down, and raised me back up with a different perspective. You understand? Humble. So everybody, I think, goes through a season. I remember when I was a part of the old church, my father-in-law's church in Zion, that church, he went through a rough season in his life. And the church went through a rough season. But a man of God out in New York took his leaders, flew over there, came with it by his own money, spent 1 week over there, gather the people together, get down with us in prayer and fasting, and the trench just went down in the foxhole with us to battle the enemy. And when he left, it was a different church. And I remember I later go on to become the assistant pastor of that church, and that pastor in Long Island went through a season where he lost his mind. And his church broke apart, and the members began to fight. And I grabbed a few people with catch a flight. And we fly to New York, and now I'm in the trenches with him.
Oh,
That's what it
And
is.
so it is just a season that we go through. What I would say, though, is what could be put in place to help pastors who are going through these seasons is a vision like the Icbp. An organization in which pastors belong to, where they have built meaningful relationship, where it is considered a safe space.
wow.
I don't believe there's nothing that I'm going through in my life that I can say, Bishop. I know you're going to.
But can you just give me a minute? Let me say something.
And the others out, I'm saying.
Yes.
And one of the things that Pastor Paul said when we initiated International Council of Bishops in the early stages of the sharing what it's going to be like,
Yes.
those were some of the main things that we addressed, that we know that there is nowhere you can find in Canada where pastors have a venue that they could come and vent and share. The first program we had in Icbp, Pastor Paul was there. You know what happened, right? Persons begin to release a lot of things that they were having been in pain, and it caused a contention in some sense. So we very much are aware that there is a need for that platform. And so it is here now. It is not that it's not. It is here. It is formed. And we are here. Myself, I know that you're capable men. And I believe that, and can I say this right now here, that this young man has grown so much that he's my friend now. Good friend. And I'm telling you, I talk to him like once a week. This never happened in 25 years we're around, right? But there's something that happened. We recognize the maturity in each other and know that we can benefit from each other somewhere along the line. I don't think there's anything else about it. It's just the level of maturity that is there. It's not that we have big churches or whatever, but we're mature, that we can converse and share ideas and concept that is pertinent for the directions that we're going. And those are things that I am just saying that you can be around persons for 15, 20 years, but there's a point in time that you're going to see that these persons are profitable for the ministry. Like Paul said that John Mark, send him because he's profitable for ministry.
And I think let me just concur with his brothers and also put in the mix. I think one of the things too, sometimes image can be a block to us getting the help that we need. So it goes in two ways, right? In relationship, we need to be authentic. Have you ever met some pastors and they have never been through anything? Seems like,
Oh God!
I mean, how you doing? Oh, I'm not talking about you walking around, bleeding over people, But if they have, it seems like they have never experienced anything. Even in this pandemic, everything is great.
Everything is great,
right? So where we need to have relationship where we can be truly authentic.
Transparency.
This month has been a difficult month. I'm in a rut. Just seems I just cannot get going. And we have that conversation. So that authenticness, that transparency is important. So that's the first thing. The second thing is where when we can share this with each other, it is not used to hurt.
Wow.
Right? It's not used to hurt. So that's what we need to see in order for us to be to go into that area.
We have one more question and then we're going to close the show. But I just want to add something because I think it's important. I remember as a young man growing up, my bishop, God Small, my spiritual father, we used to go to church again, and he would take me, and then he would, as I get to the door, he said, "Son, you're going to preach tonight." And I'm saying to myself, "How am I going to preach? I don't even know." And if you know those type of churches back in those days, some of the teams that they give you, you'd have to beg for help. But I'm saying this to say that accountability, friendship is very, very important. I've seen, and you know what? Sometimes I think my father was so hard on me because the things that other people could do and get away with, he would never allow me to get away with it. And he always said to me, "Son, to whom much is given, much is required." And I live with those things, and there are things that he have said to me over time that have helped me so tremendously to grow. We need to have somebody in our life that we look up to, that we model them. And I'm telling you, as men, never feel like you're too big as a man not to have somebody that you can model. Especially if that person is of a godly representation, somebody who can take you to the next level. I've seen tremendously where it has helped. The last question, Bishop Lovelace.
Yes.
What if the people don't return?
If the people don't return, the call's still there, brother.
Okay.
The call is still there. Because it's, as I think earlier I said, we're not called to build an empire. We're called to help people to in the journey in the kingdom. I tell John Maxwell said, if you are leading and nobody is following, you're just taking a walk. Right? So recognize, go in ministry and be patient with people. You know, it's always about, you know, fulfilling kingdom possibility. Do what you're called to do. And Paul put it the best way. He said he plants, Apollos water. God
increase from God.
You know, so just if you're plant, if you're watering, water.
Just keep watering.
Yeah,
because and the reason why I asked that question, I'm going to ask the same question to Pastor Edward, but the reason why I asked that question is there's some people that are very strong in church, but at this time they're scared.
Yeah,
they're nervous. They don't know. Even if they come back to church, they're not. People are wondering, am I going to be able to hug and greet and fellowship? You know, but there are people that are just scared. So same question to you, Pastor Edward. What if the people don't return after COVID?
Well, I'm cognizant of that, and that's why my timetable is not the government's.
Okay.
I'm giving people a little bit more opportunity when the news is a little bit better. I know the trend has been downward, but I'm thinking if online is working, our audience is better, giving has not dropped off, what's the rush, right? So people will literally come back when they're comfortable. And then there are those who rightfully should not come back because of their age, so on and so forth, because of their medical history. They probably want to be a little bit more cautious. So those people, I think, will slowly get back into it. But over time, I believe in that they will come back and things will gradually come back to normal. I also believe that church is going to be brighter. It's going to be bigger. I believe people's eyes are open to how vulnerable we are in society, how fragile the society is, the economy is, the government is, life is, your job is, the world is, and without God, you're nothing at all. And so I truly believe with that, I believe you're going to see how people who never used to go to church start showing up.
Yeah.
Amen. So
Amen.
I believe in God for that. I'm optimistic about what the Lord is doing. It's going to be an awesome.
Very optimistic.
Bishop faces the same question. I want to hear from you too.
Well, I thank you. I mean, I am very much aware of, there's a few things that I think a couple of weeks ago, Bishop Lovelace sent a document and said, take a look. And I find that document was so helpful in just getting an understanding of how the minds of the people are thinking after they have done what was called a survey over the last 3 months of what's happening. They say 40% of persons did not watch service on social media, and they did not get a chance to go to church. So you have to look at that 40% is there that are out there that are unchurched at this particular time. There's a 22% of persons that go from church to church seeking for a church right now. And there's another 20% that is loyal to their church. So even though our views are high, we are only having about 20 to 25% of the people that we pastor that is really watching our services online. But that is the stats of what's out there. But let us just look at something. I've always said this. People are never connected to a place or a building. They're always connected to a personality.
That's right.
There are persons that are connected to the personality that I have, my wife's personality,
Wow.
for the relationship that we have, that they consider themselves my children. I am so grateful because some of the members of my church, they're like my own children that I gave birth to. So we know that we will have persons that are not going to return, but I still believe that we will have many that will return because of what we're offering. And what we're offering is what they are looking for. And don't be surprised. Somebody has just found a church that they wanted to find over the last 5 years because of the way you present the sermon, your personality, and all of what is happening. So, you know what I say? Let us put it into the hands of God, and He will carry this on because it's in God's hands.
Wow. Let me take this time to say thank you to all my guests, all my friends, Bishop Lovelace, Pastor Paul Edwards, Bishop Carlton Facey. I want to say thank you for joining me in COVID-19 and beyond. Rest assured that as we continue to do these programs, again, I want to reiterate the 3 pillars: empower, motivate, and educate. That's what we aim to do. I want to say thanks to all my friends and families in Canada and around the world that took the time out to watch this program. We're so grateful to have you. I want to let you know that we don't take it lightly that you took your time to spend with us as we educate you on this COVID-19. We will be having part 2 of COVID-19 and beyond with the millennials. You don't want to miss it. July 6th, 7:30 p.m. right here at Gospel Faith TV studio. It will be COVID-19 and beyond part 2 with the millennials. The flyer is going to be coming out very, very soon. I want to take this time out also to thank my administrator, my beautiful wife. She's such a great help to me. And to my daughters, who is my producer, Aria Brown and Elitra Brown. They took time to put all my documents together. So I want to take the time out to say thanks to them. I want to thank also a special thanks to my spiritual father. As I oftentimes say, I am able to do the things that I do because of him, because he invested his time in me. When people didn't believe in me, he believed in me. And I want to say thank you, Dad. Thank you, Bishop, for investing your time. And I appreciate you. God bless you. See you next time, July 6th, COVID-19 and beyond, part 2 with the millennials.
Faith TV, taking the gospel to the world.